Welcome to the Canadian SME Podcast, a podcast for Canadian small businesses. We interview Canadian experts and entrepreneurs to provide expert insight into marketing, innovation, business leadership, technology, and trends that impact small business. Our mission is to empower Canadian small and medium enterprise to help you grow your business.
Hi everyone, this is Maheen from Canadian SME Small Business Magazine. Recently, Rocco Rossi, President and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, released the following statement in reaction to further restrictions announced. We recognize the restrictions brought in today are here to help save lives and curtail the spread of the virus. However, in absence of further support, new restrictions will simply devastate Ontario's business community. An expedited vaccine rollout, prioritizing essential workers who cannot work from home, is critical to preventing these stops and starts that are so damaging for business. With the Ontario Business Support Grant coming to a close, we call for continued supports that will see businesses through the third wave of the crisis. We recently had the chance to chat with Rocco, a successful entrepreneur and business executive, champion fundraiser, and dedicated public servant. Rocco joined the Ontario Chamber of Commerce in 2018 as president and CEO. In this podcast, he discussed how the Ontario Chamber of Commerce is helping its business community during this challenging time and discussed his thoughts on Ontario Chambers of Commerce call for accelerated vaccine rollout to expedite the safe reopening of the economy. Hi, Mr. Rossi. On behalf of Canadian SME, I'd like to welcome you to our Small Business Podcast. How are you today?
I am great pleasure always. Thank you for always shining a light on Canadian SMEs.
Thank you so much for joining. Now, Mr. Rossi, stay-at-home order is another hit to small businesses. And as the voice of Ontario business community, how is Ontario Chamber of Commerce helping its business community during this challenging time?
You're absolutely right. It's a tremendously challenging time. It's devastating for many businesses. We've lost thousands of businesses across Ontario, across the country. We'll lose many more. But we also know that the virus has taken a very different turn with the new variants of concern. The healthcare system is seriously at risk. And there's hope along the way in terms of the vaccine. So the things we're focusing on, one, making sure that the supports to business stay and are expanded during this period. Two, that we ramp up the use of rapid testing to try to ensure that we're, as best as we can, keeping people in the essential services safe through this period. Three, focus on helping to accelerate the vaccine rollout, because at the end of the day, as we've seen, lockdowns are not a permanent solution. They just buy you time at an enormous price. And the long-term answer is to get every Ontarian, every Canadian vaccinated as quickly as possible. And that's where our focus is.
Right. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic, as we're talking about it, you're right that it has had an unprecedented impact on the Canadian economy. Now, it's clear that entrepreneurs still believe in their opportunity to grow over the long term, but they're still facing significant issues right now that are leading some to question if they can sustain their business long enough to move into the recovery mode. Now, what would you say is the biggest challenge that Canadian SMEs will face post-COVID-19?
Well, for many, they will be up to their eyeballs in debt. And so restarting is very difficult when you have a mountain of debt to deal with. There are estimates of anywhere around $200,000 or more because of the stop-start, because of reduced revenues, the additional costs of PPE, et cetera. And that's even after all of these supports that governments have given. So they will be doing the calculation. Can they, based on the margins that they generate and the debt that they have, do they see a path towards paying down debt and still earning a decent living for themselves and their family? And if they don't, they're going to close their doors. And the more that make that decision, the more scarring there is on the economy, the harder and longer and more costly it will be to recover the economy, to build back, and to build forward.
Absolutely. Now, talking about the support, last week, the Ontario Business Support Grant application was closed. What response do you feel is appropriate on the federal, provincial, and municipal level for supporting small businesses?
Well, I think given that we have a new lockdown that basically came after the Ontario budget, specifically, that thinking about a third round of those small business loans would not be inappropriate, because it is a new reality that's going to be more costly for businesses. We applaud the government that it went to a grant program instead of more loans because businesses couldn't take on more debt. The $10,000 to $20,000 helps. It's not a solution on its own. We were delighted to see it doubled, and that it became automatic for those who got the first tranche. They didn't have to go through all of the paperwork, which is something that a small business just doesn't have the time and capacity to do. So that was helpful. The fact that it got expanded into a number of tourism categories was helpful, but there are still lots of business categories that were excluded from the grants. And so we should be looking at ways to ensure that we're covering those people in some way. And we have to ensure that the grants and the programs at all levels, not just the provincial, the federal level as well, continue for as long as the crisis is here. So to arbitrarily say we're gonna cut off the rent subsidy program in June, well, if you could tell me that the crisis was going to go away in June, then I would agree, but it's not. So how are we going to extend that into the summer and into the early fall as we wait for the vaccination numbers to increase?
Right. Now that we are facing the third wave, what measurements should entrepreneurs implement to ensure the safety and protection of their employees and customers?
Well, all of the things that we've heard of before in terms of PPE, in terms of physical distancing. In addition, we are working with the Ontario government to roll out rapid tests as quickly as possible as an additional measure to give some confidence, some assurance to employees, to consumers, particularly now in the essential services that remain open. We want to make sure that we're containing any spread of the virus. I think as well, more focused distribution of the vaccine so that we accelerate vaccinating essential workers who have no choice. They've got to go to work. And we need to get them protected as quickly as possible to break the chain of virus transmission. I think tracking and tracing, again, all of us have a duty to download the COVID Alert app onto our smartphones to help our public health personnel track and trace so that we can manage this crisis as opposed to just respond to it. And consumers have a duty as well, because there are still many with means who are working from home, and for those people, the ability to buy local, click local, whether it's curbside or delivery, every little bit of support for local small business is going to help those businesses survive and to operate in a safe and secure manner.
Right. Now, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce called for accelerated vaccine rollout to expedite the, safe reopening of the economy. Can you share your thoughts on this?
Look, we look south of the border, and this past weekend alone, the U.S. set a new record. 4.6 million vaccines were administered on Saturday in one day. For Canada, to be at that level, we would have to be administering 508,000 vaccines in one day. On the Saturday, we did less than half of that. Ontario would have had to have done 192,000. Again, we did less than half of that. The United States is our single largest trading partner. It's a source for tourism. It's a source for cross-border shopping both ways. And that border is going to remain closed if we don't get up to their level, not to mention the impact on lives and health in the interim. So, as I like to say, faster saves lives and livelihoods. The sooner we can do it, the better. Our current pace has recently increased. Last week we were doing over 100,000 a day, which is a great next step. We need to be doing 150, 160, 170,000 a day, or better if we can as the supplies ramp up, because that is the only way out. We've seen it in Israel, we see it in the UK, and so our focus needs to be on accelerating that.
I 100% agree. Now, let's be honest, things are changing so rapidly and the world is in a chaotic phase right now, and struggling entrepreneurs are scrambling to maintain any sense of control during these tough times. On a final note, what advice can you give to entrepreneurs that can be beneficial to them during these tough times?
Well, I've been amazed at the amount of creativity and the overused word pivoting that's happened. And yes, we talk about businesses closing down, but lots of new businesses are taking advantage of lower rents and spaces and so on to start new businesses, to redo their business model, to really embrace the digital economy. Those who've been able to do that have done far better than those who haven't. So there are opportunities. If your business doesn't lend itself easily to that change, or you're in a region of the province of the country that doesn't have broadband, which is something that we also pushing very hard on all fronts to ensure that it happens. But then it's really around cash management, and it's around ensuring, working with your local Chamber of Commerce to make sure you're accessing every possible support program you can to stay afloat till we get to the other side of this. The light is at the end of the tunnel. Stay positive, test negative, and get vaccinated as soon as your turn comes up.
That is 100%. I really agree with you. It's the structure that holds your work life as well as your personal life together, and it's the key to success. Now, thank you so much, Mr. Rossi, for sharing such useful insights. Now, from innovative SMEs to established, multinational corporations and industry associations, OCC's commitment to improve business competitiveness across all industries is truly commendable. Thank you so much for taking the time out today.
Great pleasure. You stay safe.
You as well.
Thank you for listening to the Canadian SME Podcast. Please visit canadiansme.ca to subscribe and join us next week as we share more expert advice from Canadian business leaders.